Hey Jen, how are you?
Good morning. I'm awesome.
Oh, it's so good to see you back home in Nashville.
Yes, just made it home last night.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks for doing this.
Sure, of course. It's my pleasure.
So, Jen is a very, very dear friend of mine. I asked her to join us today because she's just made a really big impact in my life, and I wanted to share that with a lot of the folks that are starting to follow the show. So, really amazing person with a background actually in technology, which is what we originally connected on, but now as an entrepreneur herself, runs a really amazing company called the Agility Leadership Group. She'll talk a little bit more about that as we dive in today too. But Jen, I would love to hear from you a little bit more about your background, how you went from being in technology to this entrepreneurship and this amazing company that you're running now.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I started my career actually at T-Mobile. So I started with them when they were a startup and left when there were 42,000 employees. So I actually had a number when I started. I was that early on in the business. And in that, I had just an amazing career and got to learn a ton. So I started off with them in sales, much like you, and learned a lot about what it takes to be successful. And was able to kind of climb the ladder. They started purchasing companies and needed folks to onboard. And at that time, I was in training for them. They bought 7 companies in the span of 2 years, and I started working with those companies to onboard them and bring them on board. Had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different things with them. So worked in training, actually owned training and development for them, started employee engagement. Last thing I did with them was strategy and insights before I left. Worked with the senior team and had a chance to do side-by-side coaching with the executives there. And just really, that was the place where I got my feet wet around how do you lead transformation in an organization? Because we were doing big things and we were doing it while we were growing into a large global company.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
then that led you to a vision for starting your own company where you focus specifically on that strategy and development piece, right?
Yeah, so I had a huge opportunity with them. And when I decided to leave, when they were a large company, I had again, so much experience with them doing a lot of broad things, but I wanted to be able to do that for other companies. And so I left in 2011 to form my own. In fact, my first one was a huge turnaround in Mexico. It was a company that wanted to sell. And so they brought us in to do a huge sales transformation. And we were able to do it. In fact, we did it so quickly, they were able to sell ahead of time and got a really nice profit. So that was wonderful. But yeah, that's what I do today is I help grow companies and grow leaders.
It's one of my favorite things about you. When you and I first connected, I was really in a place where I was looking for that as well, and really influenced my life and helped me think differently about how leadership is so impactful in being successful in business. You can be a good salesperson, you could be a good developer. All these skills, are very, very important in things we go to school for. But if you're not focusing on leadership and developing that aspect of your life, you're going to be stagnant in your career. So can you talk about some of the best practices you use and things you introduce to these executives to help them think more like a leader and actually grow them as a person that can really, take a company forward by really leading their people to bigger and better things than just their daily skills?
Yeah. Well, leadership is critical. And it is either in our organizations, it's our secret weapon or our Achilles heel. And so that really becomes the thing that we can really truly leverage if we want to create a competitive advantage. So one of the things that I do is I work with helping leaders grow. So I think it was Albert Einstein that had the quote. In fact, I have it up on my computer. It says, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." And I think it's such a great quote that reminds us that we have to continue to evolve as leaders. If we want to be able to lead change and transformation in our organizations, we have to be able to change and transform in our own leadership and how we show up in the world.
So when I was working with you, Jen, you focused a lot on mindset, which is something I'd never thought about being impactful in career. So can you talk a little bit more about that when you talk about leadership and growth, how that has to do with mindset and working on yourself as an individual before you can really be helpful to the group?
Yeah, so our success as leaders is made up of both psychology, like our mindset, and also strategies, how we do things. So often we focus on the strategies. We want to go find out what's the latest, greatest, and we focus there. And that's only about 20% of what makes up our success. 80% is made up of our psychology. If you've ever watched professional sports, you can tell this, right? You get sports, whether it's football or basketball or even Olympics. You watch them and they're masters at their skill. They know exactly how to do this stuff, but yet they get to the free throw line or they get to the final 3 minutes of the football game. And it's not their skill that wins the game. It's what's happening up here. And it's the same for leaders. If we're not developing our mindset, if we're not working on it, we slow our ability to be able to create innovative solutions and to be able to really lead in times like these.
That's good. How do you go about, assessing that and figuring out where somebody is and where the growth needs to be focused on when you first engage with a customer?
It's fantastic because we use some really world-class tools that help us be able to get to the heart of the matter. So I'm kind of a nerd at heart, and I love finding the best of the best when it comes to tools. So I look for things that are really well researched, very steeped in actually showing that this is going to move the needle on performance. One of the tools that I use helps leaders see how they show up. What's the perception of their leadership? And we call it kind of an MRI of their leadership. And this gives them the ability to see how they're showing up in the world and to be able to adjust accordingly. One of the things that this tool also shows is it shows where they are in terms of their mindset and their level of thinking and how evolved they are. So as leaders, just like, I know you do this with a lot of IT leaders. So what happens when you try to run a new program on an old operating system? Does it work? No, it's clunky, it's horrible, it's awful. So the same happens for us as leaders. We have to continue to upgrade our leadership operating system. And so we use tools that help illuminate this for leaders and help make it easy, point them exactly to where they need to be. It benchmarks them against other leaders so they know kind of where they are in the mix. And again, opportunities instantly pop up for them. And that's the stuff that we work on to be able to help them go to the next level.
Now, that's a form of digital transformation right there. We've talked about that in the past. That's what I focus on day to day, but mine is around helping folks go to the cloud. Yours is around mindset and leadership. So it's just a different way to look at it, but it still needs the same care and attention as upgrading your systems.
Yeah, it is a form of going to the cloud, right? There's a piece of our mindset that it's like we've got to go in in fact, we develop the goals and the things that we want to accomplish through our conscious mind, but most of what's running us is our subconscious or our unconscious mind. And so helping leaders to understand what's actually running them so it doesn't get in the way, those things that are just running in the background that we don't pay attention to, but that if we are not aware of, begin to run us, is really critical.
Oh, that's so true. Now, when you're engaging with customers and starting to help them realize this for the first time, is there often a lot of tension because it's, a new way of thinking for them?
Sometimes whenever we make changes as humans, there's always some anticipation of what could go wrong or what could come up. Sometimes that's what I see. So I work with a lot of overachievers and they get nervous about what's going to come back in the assessment. And it's always fun. It's always different than what they expected because it's never going to be exactly what you expect. But in that, I get to deliver a lot of messages that sometimes are really encouraging to people around, wow, you may not be leading into your full potential. People see you at this level, and here's where you evaluate yourself. And sometimes it's the opposite message. It's like, hey, you know what? There's some opportunity for you. This is a blind spot that's been illuminated. For me, I would rather know that. I don't want to keep going through life having a blind spot and everyone else can see it, but I can't. So that place of being able to see it, and then once you have awareness about something, you have a power to make a choice, which allows you to change. With no awareness, change can't happen.
That's good. Now, you work a lot with executive teams as well, and I've introduced this idea in the past of if there's tension at the top, it's going to be felt all throughout the organization. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit more about the dynamic of how that works and how you address that in helping executive teams become more united?
Yeah. So one of the things I often tell people is I don't need 6 months in your organization to know what's going on. I only need 60 minutes in your boardroom. Because whatever is happening in that boardroom between the executive leaders, between that team, is what's happening in the organization. So if sales and marketing aren't talking to each other, if service and sales don't trust each other, whatever it is, whatever's happening in that room is happening through the whole organization. And so one of the most powerful things that I see that can help transform an organization is getting that team to work together, because you can pick off a powerful player So you can pick off talent one by one, but when a team works together, it becomes a competitive advantage that other companies can't replicate. How that team works together, I mean, you've seen it in, again, I'll go back to professional sports. There's a difference between, them having a talented player, LeBron James, and them actually having a team, right? So if you can remember back to some of the Michael Jordan days, that team was unstoppable. And it all is how we play together. We don't do things in the world that we live in today. We don't accomplish things individually. We accomplish things in teams and in groups and with collaboration, because it's so complex today. And so how that team works together is really critical and important. And a lot of the work that I do is about helping them to be a high performing team. So I often will say I take a team of all-stars and make them an all-star team, because those two teams play really, really differently.
I like that. That is a great analogy. So what about with an organization that hasn't really well defined their culture and well defined their principles and values? How do you help guide those folks to figure out what's important to them and get everybody in agreement to then be able to influence the organization from the top down?
Well, that's the first place we start. So one of the questions that I'll ask is, what's the outcome that you're driving to? What's the thing you most want? Because if we aren't all moving towards something that we care about, a goal, a mission, a vision, we're not going to be able to do too much, right? We're going to be sort of just spinning. And so that's the first place we start. The second place is really understanding what are the values by which we're going to live. I mean, that becomes our brand promise to our customers. It becomes our internal brand promise to the people we hire, our employees, the people that work for us. And so if that isn't figured out, that's the first place to start, is get that figured out. And it can't just be something we post on the wall somewhere, like, oh, these are our 15 values, or it really has to be something. And so I go through a process to make them articulate, what are the values? What does it mean when you're living that value? What does it look like? And then also coming up with what's most important to least important, which can be challenging. But that's part of the process. And then when we're hiring, we're looking, I can't remember who it is. I think it might be Zappos that has them ask, or maybe it's JetBlue. Gosh, now I'm going to forget, but they have them talk about the values and which of the value most resonates with them and why. And then I love this question. If you were to add a value, what value would you add and why? Because I think it gives you a sense of who the person is. I'm not a big one for hiring for culture fit. I think that becomes a way that we talk about just hiring people that look and sound like us. And that is not how we create a good company. How we create a good company is by finding people who want to go on the same pathway or headed on the same vision, who have values that, they can uphold the values, but we don't want people who see things the exact same way we do.
Oh, I agree. You want diversity because that's what makes the most successful teams.
Yeah, and if you want to have innovation, you've got to have different thinking at the table.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally agree. So flip it a little bit to a person looking for a job. How important is it for that person to have their own values defined and make sure who they go to work for aligns with those values?
Yeah, I think it's really critical. And so that's what I ask people to think about is when you're going to work for a company, are you going to feel happy and aligned with what the mission, whatever mission it is you're taking on for them? Is that going to be something that truly lights you up? Are you aligned from a values perspective? And it's not just, you have to be careful because the values on the wall aren't always the values that are lived in the hallways. And so really understanding, one of my favorite questions to ask as a candidate is, what do you love about working here? And you see a lot about people's passion for working for the organization. Love is a very powerful word and it trips people up. And so if they truly love the organization, you'll hear it straight away. And if not, they'll trip over it, and it just gives you a subtle clue to what's really going on there. And do people really enjoy being part of the fabric of the organization?
So Jen, something I really admire about you is that you've studied this as well. I mean, even back to when you were an undergrad, you studied organizational leadership. Tell us a little bit more about what organizational leadership has meant to you and what you've learned from time actually sitting down and learning about the systems and processes and what's important to actually make an impact in business.
Yeah, so when I was at T-Mobile, I had the opportunity to go back and get a master's in organizational development. And at the time, it was a very new field. It's a little bit more people know what it is now, but back in the day, my mom was like, "You're doing what?" She thought I was organizing closets or something, and I'm like, "No, Mom, it's about developing organizations. It's about taking people and process and systems and getting them to work together in the most high impact way." And honestly, that's what we're doing when we do digital transformation. We're trying to get people, process, and systems to really work together and to transform in a way that we can serve our customers from a totally different perspective, that we can serve them in the way that they want to be served. And so I think that that's really helped me to be able to stand alongside with leaders and help them as they're leading digital transformation, because it's not the systems that mess us up. It's when we're doing these huge turnarounds, it's often the people. And so helping them understand, how do we actually get people to go from this place over here to this place over here, whether it involves training or getting them to change how they do things or even just change their mindset. I help leaders really understand the hacks that help them make that process as quick as possible.
So Jen, we've talked a lot about how leaders are readers. I think I actually learned that from you. So I want to hear from you, what are some of the books that you're reading and content, even over the years, that you use to influence your leadership style and how you coach folks?
Yeah, I have to say I'm a growth nerd. So I am reading books, and last year I went back and I tabulated, like, what did I do from a professional development? Because for me, I'm coaching and working with organizations, so it's up to me to be at performing from a peak place. Because when I am coaching and working with people, I eventually become the leadership cap for them if I'm not growing and changing. It's actually, people often ask me, what do I do if I want to get a coach? What do I ask them? And I say the very most important question you could ask them is, do you have a coach? Because if they don't believe in it enough to have one themselves and to be growing and to being coached themselves, then they're probably not the coach that you want to have. But last year I spent over 350 hours in immersive professional development, like listening to the best of the best. And that's not even what I did with reading and podcasts. That was like physically attending, events and things like that where I could grow. But it's something that I'm passionately committed to. I believe, Warren Buffett says the best investment you'll ever make is the investment you make in yourself. And this is coming from the man who's made, some of the biggest investments, financial investments in the world. And so I really take that to heart. I'm always reading a bunch of different books. So I'm doing leadership stuff and I'm doing business stuff. A business book that I've really enjoyed lately is actually by Keith Cunningham. It's The Road Less Stupid. So advice from the chairman of the board. And again, I'm a businesswoman. So that's what I'm about. When I come into a business, I want to change the landscape of the business. And I do that through leadership. But a lot of what I do is ask really, tough questions. He asked some really good, tough questions in this book, and it's challenged me as a business owner and entrepreneur to look at my own business and think about what I'm doing there. I'm also reading a book together right now. It's by the former Surgeon General. It just talks about the importance of community and kind of the epidemic around loneliness. And I see a lot of loneliness in leadership. They talk about it's lonely at the top of the organization. And a lot of the people that I coach are CEOs. And, so I wanted to just get a sense of how to help, people come together. I think right now, especially in the times that we're in, where people are physically disconnected from each other, I'm seeing it more and more in leaders. And it's a very fascinating book that he took on to really understand, the research and what's happening around loneliness and the impact on our bodies and our mindset when we come from that place.
That's good. I like it. Something I had to learn too, back to talking about, investing in yourself and coaching and, being able to learn from folks on the level they invest in themselves before you decide to invest in them. And I had to learn that it's actually not selfish, that it's to the better of the people you're around and the people that you're working with, if you actually take that time and invest in yourself. But I think it's also more than just mindset and career focus. I think health and fitness comes into that as well. So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of your life and the importance of things like sleep and diet and, actually working out and how that impacts your overall success as an individual?
Yes. So I often will tell leaders, leaders bring the weather. So when we walk into the organization, we bring the weather pattern for the day. And we may not physically be walking in, we may be on a Zoom or something else, but we're still bringing the weather. And so it's up to us to be able to check in and see what kind of weather are we bringing. Are we bringing a storm system? Are we bringing, something that's going to help really the organization to flourish? And that really comes from a place of the first place it comes from is our physiology, how we actually show up physically in the world. And so exercise and sleep and what we eat, what we take into our body. I mean, we know this from a systems perspective, right? If you put garbage into a system, what are you going to get out on the back end?
Yeah.
You're going to get garbage. So the same is true for our bodies, right? So what we're taking in. So we've got to really pay attention to what that is. And I tell leaders all the time, guard your mind, like really, really, really think about how much time and what is it that you're taking in. So, today, like how much time are you spending watching the news versus taking something in that's going to truly grow and develop you and help you go to the next level? The news is designed to inspire fear. That's what gets us to tune into it. And so, we have to just be so mindful of the things that we're doing, because physiology is first how we show up. Like if we want to feel a certain way as a leader, we have to change our physiology. That's the place that it first starts. And then we start to work on our mindset, right? Because that's the second place. It's our beliefs that show up. So it's our physiology, it's our beliefs, and that's how we begin to kind of make change in our life is through one of those two areas.
Oh, that's good. I totally agree. You talked about the news and how a lot of times it's more fear influencing than hope and getting people excited. So I think that's a big driver to what I know about you, to starting a media company and using that to positively influence leaders. So I want to hear from you. What is your vision for this media company you started, and what is the impact you're looking to make through it?
Yeah, so last year I purchased a company and transformed it into this media company, Agility Media Group. And the whole idea there is it primarily does things for large corporations. So there's a lot of work that's being done, for the big companies that you think of. So, we've done work for T-Mobile and Amazon and Facebook and some of these really large companies. But I wanted to be able to continue to do that work. I think as leaders, how we communicate is so important. So we've taken what we know about communication and leadership and how you show up and translated that into this company to help people that are leaders within organizations to be able to show up in the best way possible and to communicate in a way that really lands. We've studied, what are the 6 languages people speak? And so how can you as a leader, when you go and maybe you're doing some type of a video out to, could be your shareholders, or it could be, the people who work for you, your employees, your customers, but being able to help them be able to craft something that's truly going to land with people. So we've kind of combined the two businesses together in some ways. And then the other thing that we've done is to be able to tell people stories. So I have such a passion for business, and I don't want to just serve the large companies of the world. I want to be able to serve a lot of these medium and fast growing companies. And so being able to come in and help them tell their story so that they can grow and become all that and who they want to be. And that to me is really inspirational. There's not a lot of women-owned media companies. And so there's an opportunity too, to just be able to amplify a different voice in the world. And I think it just brings in new perspective. It brings in just a different way of looking at the world. And so I'm excited to be able to do that.
So Jim, with your companies, you have Agility Leadership Group and Agility Media Group. So you're really big on this idea of being agile. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means in your business and how you explain that to your customers?
Yeah, so agile leadership, we actually use it as an acronym. And it comes back to how we want leaders to show up in the organization if they truly want to be able to lead in times like these. So the A is for awareness. We need to be aware as leaders because we can't change anything unless we're aware of it. But we have to be aware of how we're showing up and leading ourselves and how we're leading in the organization. The second thing is we have to be the guides of our organization. So think of whitewater rafting. If you've ever been whitewater rafting, that's what I think of when I think of a guide. It's the person who sees the end and who can navigate through changing waters to be able to get us there in the best way possible. I is for influence. And if you are going to be a leader, you have to have influence. That is what leadership is. It's not a title or position. L stands for lifelong learner, because those leaders who are going to be able to lead like this have to constantly be expanding their capacity to lead. And the last one is energized, because as leaders, if we don't have energy, we're not going to do any of these things. And so that's the model that we use when we help train leaders on how to lead and be agile in times like these.
Oh, that's great. And I'm a huge believer in agile too, just a little bit different in my world. It's
Yes.
agile software development, but it makes sense. I think very similar to what we talked about digital transformation and the way that you do it being another way to go to the cloud. Similar with agile, like you've got to have that approach to life or else you're going to be left in the dust. So I really like that. That's a very good way to look at things. And I just really like how you framed that up. And I love that you live by these principles. And we were talking about even when it comes to companies and their culture and values, how that's so, so important. But now I want to make it a little more personal. And when it comes to you, what is that core principle that you live by that's helped you be so successful in business and in life?
So for me, one of the things that's most important is making every day count. And I know that may sound cheesy to some, but it's truly important to me. And it actually ties back to something really personal. So my oldest son was born with a blockage in his brain. And we have had all kinds of challenges with him. We've had multiple trips to the emergency room. He's been life flighted. I've held him in my hands, barely breathing. And so we've had just a number of challenges that have come from life with him. And what it's taught me is to be grateful, to be so grateful for every single day and make every day count. For the longest time, I wouldn't tell clients about it. I just kept it really personal to myself. But I realized that I would show up to clients with such intensity, right? Because I never really knew if I was coming home to him at the end of the day. And there's something that really drives you when you have that, when you want to make sure that that what you do in the world matters, that what that day truly counts. That I think has been really powerful. It's been a really powerful lesson. And none of us have assurances that what we're coming home to is what we think we're coming home to. So making sure that when you show up, that you show up in the best way possible. You live full out, you play full out in the work that you're doing so that you can make the impact that you were designed to make in this world. And so I think that's probably the guiding principle that really inspires me to show up every day and to really do my best. I want to make an impact on this world, and I want every day to count.
I love that. Gave me goosebumps. So thanks for sharing. Jen, it was so great to have you on the show. I really appreciate you doing this today.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. It was my pleasure. So
yeah. Well, I'll see you again here soon in Nashville. And until then, keep making every day count.
Sounds awesome. Thank you.
Bye.